The 10th richest man in the world, Warren Buffett, said that you should consistently buy into low-cost ETFs. But why? Intrigued by his advice, I've spent the last 3 weeks breaking down everything you need to know about ETFs and how this applies to investing in Australia. From my research, I've come to understand 3 incredibly important points. The first being that investing in Australian ETFs is not only incredibly easy, but secondly, that 80% of millionaires in Australia say they invest in some way or another. But probably the most important point is the last one, in that starting early can have drastic changes to your financial future because of this idea of compound growth. But we'll speak about more of this later. But before we get to the juicy parts about investing in ETFs, let's go over the basics, and that is, well, what actually is an ETF? Well, an ETF, also known as an exchange-traded fund, as Google would define it, is a collection of stocks, bonds, and securities in one mutual fund. But we aren't all finance nerds here, so let's break this down into a sweet example. Okay, so let's say you're going to meet your partner's family at a party for the first time ever. And of course, you need to make a good impression because these people are important to you. So what do? You decide to bring some chocolate as a gift. Now there's one key problem with bringing chocolate though. Your partner has told you that her family is really picky about the chocolate they eat. Her dad only eats milk chocolate, her mum only likes picnic, her grandma, Boost, and well, her sister's only ever going to eat crunchy. So you don't know what to do. You see, you could buy one block of all the different types of chocolate, but let's be honest, this is way too much chocolate for a party, never mind it's going to leave you heavily out of pocket. Or you could just take one block of chocolate and hope for the best. But the issue with this is that if not everyone likes it, you risk making a bad impression with your new in-laws. So the question becomes, what do you do? Now there is actually one more solution which can fix all these problems. Can you guess what it is? Of course, it's a favorites box. A favorites box you see has a small amount of everyone's favorite chocolates so that no one goes unhappy. In a similar way, an ETF is like a box of favorites. Yet instead of buying 1 to 2 individual stocks, we can buy a small percentage of a wide range of stocks. For example, if we buy the ETF IVV, which tracks the top 500 companies across America, we are buying a small percentage in stocks like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and even Tesla. Now you're probably thinking, well, what's the benefit of this? Well, it's to diversify our investment portfolio. You see, like how we were concerned with buying one block of chocolate and whether anyone would like it, buying one stock can also be scary because if that stock goes down in price, like our party with our in-laws, our portfolio is ruined. Instead, by investing in a wide range of stocks, even if 1 or 2 perform poorly, like the cherry ripe or old gold in a favorites box, we still have a wide range of other shares in the ETF to boost our performance to make us happy as an investor. Wait. I can hear it from a mile away. But Braith, I'm the best investor in the world. I know which stocks are going to go up. I know which stocks are going to go down. Why would I bother buying in an ETF? And to that, I would say, well, maybe you are the best investor. But I would also say that from studies, 89% of professional traders have failed to beat the stock market over a 10-year period. These are people that spend their days analyzing financial reports and profit and loss statements, and you think you can beat them? Yet this isn't even the most important part. Instead, I'll ask you one more question. Given that for many of you, these investments are going to be for your future retirement or potential financial freedom, is the risk of beating the stock market, despite how low the odds are, really worth taking? Now, if your answer to this question is no, consider sticking to ETFs and outbeating 89% of professional investors. Now that we have covered what an ETF is, let's cover probably the most important part of this video, and for many of you, the reason you clicked on it in the first place, and that is the expected return on investment we can receive from investing our hard-earned cash into an ETF. Now, whilst a return on investment is never guaranteed with investing, history does suggest that ETFs are a highly profitable investing option, thus why it's gained the attention of some of the world's richest people like Warren Buffett. For example, if we look at the index of the S&P 500, which tracks the top 500 companies across America, we can see that over the last 100 years it's returned an average of 10.64% per annum. Now these returns are during a time where investors had to experience 11 different recessions. These included 90% drops in the 1929 Wall Street crash, the biggest ever global financial crisis in 2008, and more recently the coronavirus, which saw flash crashes across global financial markets. Now the most important part. If we had have invested just $1 into the stock market over a 40-year period during this time, our money would be worth on average $57, which is a 5,700% return on our investment. However, had we halved our time in the market by investing when we got to the age of 40 instead of 20 and still pulling out of the age of 60, many would assume that our return on investment would be just half of 5,700%. And well, you'd be incredibly wrong. Instead, if we were in the stock market for only 20 years instead of the 40, our return on $1 would only be $8. Now, 800% return on investment is nothing to be upset about, but considering that if we had just doubled our time in the market, we would have nearly 7 times our investment and return, it shows the importance of starting to invest early and growing that compound interest at an early age. Now, this leads me on to this important idea of timing the market versus time in the market. Timing of the market is where people try to predict the highs and the lows of the market and will invest accordingly. You see though, the issue with timing the market is much like how we were saying before with choosing our own stocks. And that is when we don't know when the highs and the lows of the market are going to be. And so if we continue to wait for the market to go lower, if it continues to rise, then we'll miss out on these important gains. And I'll give you a recent example that perfectly explains this idea. You see, since 2020 and the coronavirus stock market crash, news outlets and analysts have been predicting a major global financial crisis. However, despite these predictions, the stock market throughout this same time period has reached all-time highs, making a 145% gain on the 2020 lows. Now, had we waited for a 2020 recession as all news outlets and analysts claimed would come, we would have missed out on these important gains. Instead, the best way, in my opinion, to invest in ETFs or stocks is to prolong our time in the market, and we achieve this by a way of dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging is where, on a regular basis, you continue to buy into the stock market whether it's at all-time highs or 60% lows. By dollar cost averaging, we are averaging our purchase price into the market to best match the overall average return of the market each year. Thus, no matter the short-term performance of the market, over a long term, we should expect a nice healthy gain to our portfolio. Now, it's at this stage where you're probably considering that ETFs are the way of investing for you, but you don't know where to start. And honestly, I don't blame you. There are so many things to consider, like what type of ETF ownership to consider, and the important question of, well, what brokerage are we going to go for, including the daunting brokerage fees, but yet the most important question of, well, what ETF are we actually going to track, including its dividends, average return, and tax complications. But do not stress, we will break down all these important questions, starting with what ETF ownership to consider. Now you're probably thinking, but Braith, I thought all ETF ownership was the same. And to this, you are 100% correct if you're living in anywhere in the world except for Australia. You see, Australia is the only place in the world to have 2 different types of ETF ownership, this being a CHESS-sponsored ownership and a custodial-based ownership. CHESS-sponsored ownership, short for Clearing House Electronic Sub-Register System, trust me, it's a mouthful, is completely unique to Australia. When we purchase shares through a CHESS-sponsored broker, we are automatically registered on the Australian stock market as a CHESS holder. By being registered with the Australian Stock Exchange, it makes us the legal owner of the shares in our own personal name. The ASX manages all the different types of CHESS-sponsored owners by giving each of them a HIN, known as a holder identification number, which is completely unique to you. The HIN is important because it keeps a record of all the shares you've ever purchased within your name, which from my research can become important in 2 key instances. The first and more rare case scenario where CHESS-sponsored ownership is really important is in the rare instance that the financial institution you are purchasing your shares through collapses. Here, instead of having to deal with long and tiresome legal procedures to get our money back, we can just transfer our shares from one platform to another platform using our HIN number. However, as we said, this is only in rare case scenarios in Australia, with only one stockbroker collapsing in the past 5 years. However, it's always important to have that extra bit of security. The next benefit is quite possibly my favourite and most important reason for holding shares in a CHESS-sponsored ownership. And this is to do with brokerage fees. You see, brokers are always trying to compete to get new customers, and the best way they do this is by lowering their management fees. With our HIN number, it becomes extremely easy to transfer our shares from one broker to another to chase better fees that best suit us, with some brokers providing fees that are better for lower balances and other having fees that are better for higher balances. However, if we were with a custodial-based model, transferring brokers would be an extremely difficult process. But first, let's break down what a custodial-based ownership model is. Custodial ownership is what every other country in the world operates on, and it's where the company you purchase the stocks through uses a holding company to hold the shares for you in your name. With custodial ownership, you don't have the full legal control over your shares. Instead, the holding company holds the legal obligation to your shares and you are beneficiary owner of the shares. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, as a beneficiary, you maintain the right to buy and sell the shares whenever you want. However, you just don't have your legal name attached to the share. Now, there are two key reasons that someone would invest in a custodial-based ownership shares. And the first one being that often custodial-based ETFs have cheaper fees, with many of them providing free brokerage. This is because custodial-based ownership models often have cheaper compliance costs because all the holdings are under one legal company instead of the CHESS ownership model, which has all the holdings under a range of different investors. Now, the second benefit of custodial-based ownership is that many of them allow fractional investing. Fractional investing is where you can invest in a small percentage of an ETF. Now, this is a benefit because with all other CHESS-sponsored brokers, you have to purchase the ETF or all other stocks in full units. Now, for example, let's say we have $500 and we want to invest in the ETF IVV, which at the time of recording has a share price of $54.38. If we could only buy in whole units, we'd only be able to buy 9 shares with roughly $10 left over. However, with fractional investing, we'd be able to invest the full $500, returning us 9.19 and so on shares. You see, fractional investing not only allows us to get more market into the money in one go, but it also makes purchasing shares on a lower budget much more convenient. Now, you're probably thinking, wow, this is amazing. I'll just go buy a custodial-based ETFs. But like all good things, there is some negatives to it. The main disadvantage of custodial-based ETFs is that, well, as we said before, you aren't the full legal owner of the share. And yes, whilst you are a beneficial owner, this can have some serious complications in the rare instance that the stockbroker collapses. For example, in 2019, a custodial-based stockbroker collapsed in Australia, trapping $200 million in investor funds. As a custodial owner, you became a beneficiary to these shares and had to go through a bit of a legal battle to get back your money. And despite all the legal battles, some consumers were still left short of their money, anywhere from 5 to 20% of their funds. Ouch. But probably the more likely disadvantage of a custodial-based ETF is that, as we said before, you can't chase lower brokerage fees. And for some of you, you may be considering, well, I'm fine to go with the one broker. I don't really care about finding the cheapest brokerage fees. And this is all fine. But also know that whilst an ETF broker can reduce their fees, they can also increase their fees as well. For example, let's say you've been with a custodial-based platform for 5 years, and over the 5 years you paid free brokerage. But one day they decide to increase their fees to $11 buy and sell fees. This is completely ridiculous, and yet you only have 2 choices. You either sell the shares for a capital gains tax and move to a different broker, or you have to just cop the $11 fee and go with that from now on. All in all, CHESS-sponsored ownership and custodial-based ownership have a range of benefits and drawbacks, so it's important to weigh up your financial situation before you make a decision to go into either. Now that you've decided what type of ETF ownership you want, it's important to consider the next question, and that is, well, what broker are you actually going to go with? As we know, brokers are the platforms that sell us the ETFs. And well, from experience, it's important to consider which broker best suits your financial needs. And yes, there are a range of questions to consider before we choose a broker. These include the type of ETF ownership that the broker provides, whether it be CHESS-sponsored or custodial-based ownership, the ease of accessibility to the broker. Does it have a wide range of apps or desktop navigations that we can go to access the broker? Its security, how secure actually are our funds with this broker? But yet probably the most important question is, what are the fees related to this broker? Based on this criteria, I've broken down 2 of my favorite brokers that I would recommend to anyone wanting to get into buying ETFs in Australia. One of them is a CHESS-sponsored broker and one of them is a custodial-based ownership broker, so that everyone has an option. Now, it's important to note that I'm not sponsored by either of these brokers, and it's purely just opinion on what I think is best for other people. The first broker is BetaShares Direct. BetaShares Direct is a custodial-based ownership broker that allows you to purchase any ETF listed on the Australian Securities Exchange. The key benefit of the platform revolves around its fees. Now, BetaShares Direct offers free brokerage on all buys and sells of ETFs on their platform. Beyond its market low fees, BetaShares also offers the opportunity to automatically invest your money to take out the hassle and inconvenience of having to continually put money into the platform. Now, beyond their key benefits with their fees, BetaShares Direct also provides the opportunity to fractionally invest, which makes it easier to get in the market, a friendly user experience with their app, easy tax lodging solutions, which makes tax time so much easier, and the ability to invest in pre-built portfolios for a small management fee. Obviously, my main disadvantage with BetaShares Direct is that it isn't CHESS sponsored, and for me personally is the reason why I don't invest with them. However, the next broker is the one I personally use and my own favorite overall. And this broker would be none other than CMC Invest. You see, unlike BetaShares Direct, CMC Invest is a CHESS-sponsored broker that allows customers to purchase ETFs and shares on the Australian and American Stock Exchange. What I like most about CMC Invest is it comes with free brokerage of up to $1,000 a day per ETF. This means that I can buy $1,000 in the ETF A200, NDQ, and IVV all in the one day without spending any brokerage fees at all. For me personally, this is perfect because I'm not investing a huge lump sum of cash into the stock market all at once. Instead, I'm dollar cost averaging by buying small amounts nearly every week over a long period of time, meaning I'm continually getting free brokerage. Another benefit that I really like about CMC Invest, which a lot of CHESS-sponsored brokers don't provide, is that they recently partnered with ShareSite, which is an online tax reporting software. As a CMC Invest customer, you automatically get free access to ShareSite. Here, you can upload your investment data and it will automatically track your tax implications, making tax time much easier for you. As I've mentioned previously, CMC Invest is my personal choice in broker because of its low fees and CHESS-sponsored model. However, I also do like BetaShares Direct if you want to go down the custodial-based path. Now that you've chosen the type of ETF ownership and broker you want to go with, it's down to the most important question, and this comes to what ETF are we actually going to invest in? And well, there really isn't any correct answer to this question because as we said before, we don't know which ETFs are going to go up and which are going to go down. But like all things, there are a range of questions that we can ask ourselves which are going to define which ETF we will buy in. These questions are going to be like, what's your current financial situation like? What are the fees of the ETF? Are the dividends of the ETF actually any good? And well, where is the ETF located? Is this going to have tax implications for us, making tax time really difficult? Now, these are all questions you really need to consider before you decide what ETF you're going to purchase. From my personal experience, an ETF portfolio that best suits my investing needs is a 70-30 split between the BetaShares Global ETF and the BetaShares A200 ETF. The BetaShares Global ETF, known as BGBL, is an ETF that tracks the index of 1,500 companies across the world excluding Australia. This includes holdings in companies such as Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, and Apple. The ETF has a low management cost of 0.08% or roughly $8 for every 10,000 invested and is importantly located in Australia, making tax time extremely easy. In terms of returns, the ETF has returned an average of 13.28% per annum over the last 10 years with an average dividend yield of 1% per year. For me, BGBL is a great low-cost entry ETF to get access to a wide range of markets that extend beyond Australia. Now, my other ETF holding would be an A200, which seeks to track the top 200 companies located in Australia, including companies like Commonwealth, ANZ, Woolworths, and BHP. The ETF has an ultra-low management cost of 0.04%, or on average $4 for every $10,000 invested, and like BGBL is also located in Australia, making tax time very easy. On top of that, the returns of the ETF have returned on average 8.17% per annum over the last 10 years with an average dividend yield of 3.5% per year. For me, A200 provides me much needed exposure to Australian shares that BGBL doesn't. Combined together, both ETFs give me a wide range of exposure to all global developed markets, making me much diversified across all my investment platforms. There we go, guys. That covers everything I know about investing in Australian ETFs. Remember, this isn't financial advice, but merely just a guide of everything that I've come to learn over the past 3 weeks. Enjoy.